Hi guys, welcome back to another show. We haven't been here since last week, but I hope you guys been having a good week. I hope you guys had a good weekend so far. Today's Sunday, which means tomorrow's Monday, but it's fine. That just means that, you get through the day and then everything else. So I hope you guys have had a great, few days, and we're going to have an amazing show right now. So for those that may not know what this show is about, welcome to AnimeInkArt Live Talks, where we talk with different creators in the community about their journey in content creation and how we can support each other better in the community. So let's get a few other people in here, and then we'll start, and we'll have our lovely guests on the show right now. So let's see if we have everybody. All right, there we go. Okay. So today we have very special guests, Nigel Lynch. They are a professional comic book writer. They are the founder of Beyond Beyond Publishing Caribbean. They are also known for many titles such as the Critical Ops Task Force, as well as the Diary of the Stray Dogs. And also, they just make amazing comics and graphic novels that are Afrofuturistic, sci-fi. They can be dark, gritty, but also they highlight a lot of social issues or just things that people go through in the Caribbean because they are from Barbados. So definitely let's get them on the show and let's get it started. Hello.
Well,
How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you.
You're welcome. How was your weekend?
It was pretty quiet. I spent most of the time at home doing some stuff. Usually they go so fast, and the weeks are so hectic. So I kind of try to just veg on the weekends.
No, yeah, that's definitely true. Because once the week starts, you're just gonna keep running. That's what's gonna happen. And definitely thank you to everyone that's coming in. My friend s.com is good to see my dog. But for those that may not know who you are, introduce yourself and what you do.
Okay, so my name is Nigel Lynch, and I'm from Barbados, in Caribbean, and I've been writing comic books from about 2021. Uh, when I started as I didn't think I just wanted to do a comic book for the longest time. I just wanted to do it. At one point in time, I was into art, but my art wasn't up to scratch. So I didn't feel confident enough to, to do it myself. But I kept feeling as though, I could do this. I could do this. I spoke to some friends and stuff, and they said, well, you can write a story and get an artist to do it. So I went about doing that, and this was back when there wasn't a lot of resources in terms of knowing how to write a script,
Mhm.
and even in terms of the working with people outside of the island wasn't a thing that so I had to kind of look inwards. And I was very fortunate in our local community college. They had some artists, and they had done their graduation that year. And I took my script and I showed it to one of the guys, and we just kind of just clicked. We just talked about stuff, and for a year we kind of just basically became friends. We didn't just kind of just get into business or whatever. Just became friends, talked about stuff, shared a love of comic books, love of the medium, that kind of stuff, and with that is how we ended up forming the collective Beyond Caribbean. So it was a group of us. So I'm one of the founding members, and it was about five of us. There's Matthew Clark, Mike Winaldo, Belgrave, Tristan Roche, Delvin Howell, Alexander Haynes. So there's a bunch of us that, I don't want to miss out anybody. Um, Julian Mosley. So there's so many of us that we came together under this umbrella to kind of publish Caribbean comic books, stories that will kind of reflect what we were living, what we were feeling at the time. And one of the interesting things was over the years, we decided, we started to branch out from that mold. We started to do still telling Caribbean stories, but
Mhm.
stepping. So my first book was a gritty. urban street. Think of something like The Wire, but set in the Caribbean, very, very urban, very down to earth, dealing with those kind of things. And it was something at the time, it was my passion. And the but as you said, you get exposed to new things, you get exposed to different mediums, you read more books, and you say, well, I would like to do something, especially if within your group or within your area you're not known for that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
that's how I kind of ended up branching out into science fiction. I always loved science fiction. From the time I was a kid, I grew up with Star Wars, I grew up with Star Trek.
Yes, yes.
I grew up in that time when science fiction as a movie, science fictions and westerns,
Hmm.
those were very popular genres of films.
Hmm.
Those were everybody watched, everybody knew that kind of stuff. So a lot of my early childhood, um, because I would have been a young kid when I first watched Star Wars, would have been influences from my father in terms of him giving me these things to watch, or he, saying, "Hey, I got this VHS tape for you," and he'd sit and you watch it, and it keeps you occupied for a while, and so that's a little bit of how my start came about into the comic books.
That's awesome. And I wanted to ask, growing up in the Caribbean and, loving comics, loving nerdy things, especially as a Black person, how was it for you growing up? And then fast forward, to creating your publishing company, getting
Mhm.
to write these stories where you have representation about the things that you go through. Being able to do that, how was the transition from how you grew up to doing that? Were there, like, was it a smooth transition? Was it a full circle moment? How does it feel for you considering how you grew up?
Okay, so think of how someone like my son, in this time,
Mm-hmm.
he he grew up in a world where he never he never knew a world without social media,
Mm-hmm.
right? In my time, we grew up in a world where we didn't know a world without comic books. Comic books was commonplace. If you went into a doctor's office, there was comic books there for the children. If you went
Mm-hmm.
into a gas station, a supermarket, they were just there. If you went to school, it was in desk pockets. Someone had a comic book. Different people read comic books. Everybody had this older person who handed you down a bunch of comic books.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some people carried them a little better than others. Other people handed you down a pack of cards, right? And it was a little to do with the when I sit and I think of, I had a lot of books. I had, I'll tell you some of the books that I would have,
Mm-hmm.
for one, I remember buying the Spider-Man annual when he got married to Mary Jane, right? Big,
Mm-hmm.
thick book with
Mm-hmm.
the wedding dress and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But because the way how we viewed comic books or the way how we dealt with comic books,
Mm-hmm.
put them in bags and boards and boxes and stuff. The most you would do is put it in a shoebox if you
Yeah.
right. So so a lot of books that would have been where I would hear people talk about this is a very important book. I was like, yeah, I had that. I actually bought that. I read there's a book, and it was one of my favorite books at the time. It was the one where Wolverine versus Hulk, and Wolverine has his claws, and Hulk is reflected in the claws. It's a Todd McFarlane book, and it's a very very popular cover. People copy it all the time to talk about. And I had that book. I had a lot of the first books. I had a lot of the miniseries because when I was younger, let's say between 11 and 16 was the biggest comic book age of my time. I would save my money, and on evenings we'd go into the local bookstore. We just stand and read the books
Mm-hmm.
till we get chased or told you're not supposed to do that. And then we would buy some of the books, and I would buy a book, and there was certain books I would collect if I noticed that a book was coming in constantly. Because one of the things too, we didn't have that consistency. So
Mhm.
maybe whoever brought books into the island, they only brought in Spider Man, Hulk,
Mhm.
Transformers. They brought in what was probably popping at the time. But every now and again, you would get another book. So you would see a tour, you would see a different book, but and you would just grab it. So that's how you kind of knew about these other characters.
Mhm.
So I spent a considerable amount of my lunch money, saving up my lunch money on evenings and buying books. And what kind of killed it for me was lending out my books, them getting destroyed, and then also my interest kind of shifted. So I would have I would have been now what would have been competing for my attention would have been video games. So I would have been in the cusp of that era. So I kind of left out comic books for a while. I went into video game collecting, video games, and that kind of stuff. And what would have made me come back would have been after watching some TV series, watching some stories and that kind of stuff. I said I would like to tell a story, but I didn't want to write a book. I knew that doing film or doing anything like that was kind of out of reach. So the concept of maybe doing this as a comic book would be, you know, possible. So that's where I kind of started to get into comic books and that kind of stuff in terms of the creator aspect. So it wasn't much of a, let's say, like in my past it was a commonplace thing versus now comic books are very niche and it's very much a collector's item kind of thing where in my day it was just another form of entertainment. Every every toy, every cartoon,
Mhm.
some cereals, everything had a comic book. You know what I mean? If you can get, it was this trifecta of product placement.
Mhm.
Get a cartoon, get a comic book, get a cereal, get a toy. So comic books was commonplace. When,
Mhm. That's interesting because my dad also collects it, but I know it depends on where you live. Sometimes some people were just you got introduced, or like you said, like it got passed down, and then if it wasn't passed down, that's why some people on the island didn't know about it. But yeah, I definitely understand that, and I'm glad that you're able to actually like make your own comics as well. So I wanted to ask for those that may not know like your artistic background, because from your different bios and stuff, how they talk about how you do a lot of like careful research and planning when it comes to like your books and like the whole process, because you do have a like artistic background. So for those that may not know that background before you started, beyond publishing, Caribbean, if you wanted to share that.
okay, so I would say my artistic influence was from my mother. My mother's side, she could draw, and again, being a different time, growing up in the '80s, where you didn't have internet, you didn't have these things. You did a lot of drawing, coloring, crafts, and that kind of stuff. Um, in the Caribbean, TV at the time was only from like 4 in the afternoon to like 6 was kid programming, and there was maybe TV on the weekends. So which means that during the week you kind of kept yourself occupied by doing other stuff. So my mother, she could draw, so she kind of taught me how to draw stuff. You would usually say, "Can you draw me a cat? Can you draw this?" And then you would copy it and that kind of stuff. So I got into art. It was also something that wasn't really pushed in schools at the time during primary school, but it was something that people kind of looked at as a talent in secondary school. So a lot of my background in art is fine arts, which means I did a lot of painting, still life, that kind of stuff. Um, but when it came to trying to pick a career, as much as I loved art, everyone kind of told me, there's no money in art. there's no money in making art. Most artists were people who were doing paintings and selling to tourists on the beach, that kind of stuff. You had to kind of really be big to be selling in a, let's say, in a gallery and that kind of stuff. So art was never really looked at as a as a future. But I was kind of a bit rebellious and I still wanted to do it. So I kind of during let's say the 90s, I was very big into airbrushing. So I used to do a lot of airbrushing t-shirts, airbrushing vans, cars, vehicles, that kind of stuff. And like with anything, technology kind of wiped that out when printing and copying of vinyls and that kind of stuff was easier. And then screen printing on shirts and that kind of stuff became a lot more widespread for intricate artwork. Again, airbrushing kind of went the way of the dodo. So so then, as I said, I keep pivoting all the time. But what it kind of helped me with was now dealing with artists. It means that I can still see certain things. I can still ask for certain things. I can still sketch it. I can still sketch an idea or give an example to stuff. So I'm not like totally like out of the loop when it comes to art, But I would say that my skills are not there, And it's like art is like with anything. Once you stop
Mm-hmm.
practicing, you kind of lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I wish I had, I honestly wish I had kept up with it in some aspect. Maybe later on in life, when I have more free time, because there are people who actually pick up art in their retirement and become pretty good. So who knows what will happen in the future?
That's true. And I just wanted to highlight something for one of our followers. So it's just to clarify that, like, I am interested in it. So what they mentioned, so I wanted to give the time, or just to clarify, because I have my main job, the art projects, the show, and everything like that. So there's certain things that may go by the wayside because I need to set aside time for that, because what I promote is not the main thing I promote. But there is something interesting that was passed. I believe it was in March, and it's for, in terms of, I think it's in Africa, when it comes to like the Black Creative Initiative. I hope it's the same one that I'm looking at, but um, I believe it's in Africa. There's at least $50 billion in USD for the African creative industry. So they're trying to, just like with a lot of things that we're doing in the Black community, they're setting aside a large sum of money for creative projects that they haven't done before. So definitely, when I get the chance, I'll try to find the correct source and share it out of my pages and everything for people that are interested in that, because that is important. Especially, there have been creators that have done projects with African animators and artists that may want to know about this project. So it's just to let you know that I am interested in it. It's just sometimes it's hard to juggle the time for that specific thing. But thank you for mentioning it. But yeah, just to make sure that I didn't ignore them or anything like that. But moving on to the next question. um I just wanted to ask, yes, so you had some other comics before we talk about the Diary of the Stray Dogs, and some of the ones that I was interested in, well, was Life and Death in Paradise. And what inspired you to create that story? Because it was one of like the first ones that I saw in like your array of comics, besides like Offset, and then Heartman, from different creators in the publishing company, and then you have your stories that you've written. So I wanted to ask about Life and Death in Paradise and what inspired that comic.
Okay, so Life and Death in Paradise kind of came about from basically stuff that kind of happens in Barbados or happened in the news. I kind of took those as events and spun them into stories or basically things that I grew up hearing about in terms of you live in a village, you have that kind of village life, you have that kind of community life, and there are certain characters who are larger than life, who are villains, who are heroes, that kind of stuff. So, and then in the Caribbean too, we at the time. So, what is interesting at the time, where Then stuff like marijuana use and that kind of stuff was something that was heavily policed. Whereas now it's a lot different. So you had those aspects. You had things like other cultures coming into the islands, things like gun culture, harder drugs in terms of your illicit drugs kind of thing. So I wanted to kind of just show that even though the islands are looked at as a paradise, it's still a place where we have the same dangers and we deal with the same issues and the same problems in terms of crime. And we also have issues in terms of policing, but the policing is different versus, let's say, a racial divide because the majority everybody is black, but you still have your cops versus people. You know, what I mean, these things still kind of exist in all societies, right? So it was something that I was interested in at the time. Also, I wanted to tell a story within it too. A lot of my stories always still kind of focus with people living in a gray area where there's not necessarily good and bad. Um, you know, everybody kind of does what they believe is their own good, and your good may not be good to me. So a lot of the book was with characters' viewpoints on life from different perspectives. So you had one. So for instance, the book was divided, let's say, into about 8 characters. You got a set that you was following a family of a policeman and his family, and what he was dealing with his family, with his bills, his life, his struggles. We had a person who was a deportee from the United States who was coming back with the stigma of being a criminal, dealing with coming back into the streets, being seen as someone where his only job would have been to be some sort of enforcer. You had someone who was basically in, how do you put it, working in like sex trade kind of thing, and her life and what she was doing, and basically in the hotel industry and different shades of that. And everything kind of boiled down into a story where they all were at odds with one another and it was all connected. It was an interesting story to attempt as my first book
Mm-hmm.
because it was very complicated trying to keep the narratives going and that kind of stuff. And only up to last year, I kind of remastered some of it. We went back and we edited it. We cleaned up some of the art and stuff. And one of the interesting things is that the story still kind of holds up. So we're hoping to re-release that book maybe next year, maybe this year. I'm not sure. Um, but it taught me a lot. It taught me
Mm-hmm.
as an indie creator, yes, you can be ambitious, but try to measure it and try to know what you're doing. I think for my first book, I kind of bit off more than I could chew.
Mm-hmm.
So it was supposed to be an 8 part series,
Mm-hmm.
and I only managed to finish 5 chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of lose steam. Keeping it, there's so many things you have to kind of think about as an indie
Mm-hmm.
creator. Try to keep a team together.
Yeah.
Uh, Growing up, where you as a person, when it would have started, I I would have had a young family. I would have then been dealing with different things, with family bills, doing stuff. Everybody who was on the project was doing the same thing. Then other people was wanting to, because you can only hold an artist for so long,
Yeah.
either because somebody else will kind of take them away from you.
Mm-hmm.
The artist will have their own ambitions, and they will, you know what I mean, and they will want to go on and do something else. So those were some of the lessons I kind of learned, and it's also what made me, in terms of write shorter stories, and also try to work with international artists. Try to mix it up a bit.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I also wanted to talk about the Crossroads comics because I did read the first one and there's like 3 issues, and it's really like I found myself just very interested in it because it's just Probably having family that's from the Caribbean, I've experienced some of the things, whether it's not directed to our family, we've had people that had bad run-ins because of certain things that happen in different parts of the Caribbean when it comes to, either drugs or bad place, bad time, or even just something as simple as like in the first issue, I remember the exchange, with the little brother and like his mom and being strict and come home at a certain time because they're trying to protect them. That was my mom. So that really like put into perspective. Like it just reminded me of so many things that happened and that I wish we had this when we were smaller, like having these type of comics, so we would feel seen, like, oh, that wasn't just me that was going through that. It's a bunch of people going through that. So I wanted to ask what inspired the crossroads for you to really touch on those topics, because I'm pretty sure those weren't really easy topics to want to share, but I know you wanted to share it.
Okay, so the Crossroads books came about. That was a very interesting time. So there's a local convention called AnimeInkArt
Mm,
in Barbados.
mhm,
So it's also kind of sponsored or partly in partnership at the time with the U.S. Embassy. So the U.S. Embassy would usually kind of bring in creators from the USA to kind of show us stuff. They may bring in some cosplayers. They may do some stuff like that. So bring in some international people to the event. And the person who was working with the U.S. Embassy at the time, he kind of came around and he was a big comic book fan. He would talk, and he said, "I really like your guys' work. I would like to work with you, but when you are when you're doing stuff like this, that's something that, especially at a convention, everybody tells you that. I'm going to buy your book, or I'm going to come back, or you should do this, or I have this studio." So it was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, cool, cool, no problem, no problem." And a couple months later, he gave us a call, and he was serious. So he said, "I want to do a comic book with you guys. Could you do a comic book?" And we went in and we sat, we talked, and we said, "What could be about or what?" And he said, "I really like Life and Death in Paradise, but we can't do that. I don't like to." He was talking about different things. And I
mm,
said, "Well, maybe what we can do is a series of books.
mm,
I can make them loosely connected, but you could read them out of order, or you could read one or never read the other one. And but each story kind of deals with something." And we said, "Okay." So I said, and I said, "Well, what I want to do at the time too, it was a case where you had to kind of pick
mhm,
which topics you want to do, because
mm,
social issues kind of switch and change, and the Caribbean is a very different place. So like I kind of said, well, maybe to myself and my team, I don't want to do anything with illegal drugs, especially with marijuana, because
mm.
that, and if they did, that would have kind of aged horribly because it's actually legal,
Oh
practically.
yeah, no, I get it.
That would have aged horribly. So I said, well, let's kind of do things that would forever always be a problem.
Mm,
So uh, one of them was kind of youth with guns, but I just didn't want to youth with guns. It was like, what would drive a person to want a gun? What would make a person think they need protection
mm,
with a gun, right?
mm,
And we were given a budget, and the budget kind of made me say, well, I need to do this book in 24 pages. And this
mm,
was the first book that I ever did at the time where
mm,
I had a clear beginning, middle, end with a
mhm,
certain page count.
mm,
So it kind of taught me a lot in terms of storytelling. Get because when you are independent, you're working for yourself, and there's no budget, and you and somebody partnering on a
mm,
book would be 48 pages, and it's just going forever to how much pages is needed. But
mm,
working with, we have a budget, we don't want to blow the budget,
mm,
we got a certain amount of pages, and the story has to make sense.
mhm,
It kind of caused me to really flex my brain in terms, and it caused me to really, for the first time, bright and structured, and it caused me to
Mm.
think about so many different things. I had to manage the project and stuff like that. So the story is about basically bullying and people and guns and people
Mm.
using guns and that kind of stuff. But I didn't want it ended too tragically, and I wanted it to be. I wanted these stories to all end where you ask a question,
Mhm.
where it's not a clear cut. Like, so even in the end with the brother, I think the brother and the mother, they talk about the situation and they say, maybe he didn't do this and this and this, and it doesn't just quite go into like he's a really bad person, stay away from him, because that's not how the real world works, right? So it was to do things where you're supposed to be able to see it and be able to see where it kind of falls in your own life, kind of thing. And what was interesting is that what was a bit tricky was I actually set it in the exact same universe of Life in Death in Paradise.
Mm.
So if you read Life in Death in Paradise, you will see all the background characters are all the same characters, and so there's like a bunch of Easter eggs. I like to kind of do stuff like that where it ties all in. So the first book is about bullying and peer pressure and gun violence, and it ends with the basically the protagonist of the story going to prison. And the second book, then the embassy called me back and said, we love that book. What do you want to do?" And I said, "I would like to do a book on human trafficking."
Mm.
Said, "I think that's a bit heavy and a bit dark.
Mm. Mhm.
Well, what's the big issue? Domestic abuse." So I was
Mhm.
like, "Okay, no problem."
Okay.
I did my research and I took a character from the first book, set the story a little couple of months or so apart, and then I told a story from a different point of view,
Mhm.
bringing back the same characters again, dealing with the shame of domestic abuse,
Mhm.
people making excuses, and then people not being able to even know they're being abused and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
At the time, I also kind of was watching some stuff with people with acid attacks, so I kind of put some of that stuff together.
Mm.
It was
Mhm.
very perfect.
Yeah. Mhm.
So that was another book, and it also ends to where one of the solutions of that story was, why don't we have someone beat up the person that is doing the abuse? So
Mm.
so it was a case of like asking these questions: should violence be the answer to violence and different things like that? And we had the characters were basically talking through it and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And the book kind of resolved itself in the end, and it was it was it was a lot better than the first book in terms of structurally, because I was also looking to grow on the project. So
Mm.
the first book, I kind of rushed the last bit because I needed to end the story within the last couple of pages.
Mhm.
Well, going into the second book, I knew what I wanted to do, and I was able to cut it clean. The pace and everything is good. But was well received. Um, we was able to put a lot of hotlines for the various countries, who to call in terms of domestic abuse and that kind of stuff. And we then, by the time I went back to do the third book, the management of the embassy had changed, and I was given the green light to do the human trafficking story. But then by the time it changed, the second person in charge was like,
Mhm.
"Are you sure we?" Because he was a person who he thought comic books was just for kids. So he
Mhm.
was. It was almost like he was kind of. I had to really fight to get the third book because he was
Mm.
just, he was just ready to squash the whole project.
Mm.
I kind of said, "No, let's change what we do with your third book." So the third book was about human trafficking, and
Yeah.
I I I kind of approached it from a different angle
Mhm.
in terms of we only kind of see one side of human trafficking, but
Yeah.
there's tons of ways, from forced labor to organ people stealing organs, people stealing babies. People go overseas and grab a baby and put it in, people selling babies on the block. So I kind of put all of that stuff in the book. And they had someone come and do like a kind of analyze it to see if, and the person said, well, you did a great job. This is exactly what we're kind of looking for. So I did the human trafficking, but again, bringing back the characters again. This time the brother came out of prison. The story kind of advanced, and so if you write all three of them together, it feels
Mm-hmm.
like a story.
Mm-hmm.
That and by that time, again, the short storytelling had again I've improved, so I was able to tell a side A story and a B side story in a 24-page book.
Mm-hmm.
And I took a lot of what I learned from doing those Crossroads books to doing the Stray Dogs books. So I started to do one shots. So all of my Stray Dogs books, all of my Critical Ops Task Force books, they're all one shot books, meaning there's a told story all the time. There's no to be continued in 6 months. When you get it, it's a graphic novel. So that's what I kind of took away from that experience.
Mm, that's great. And definitely got to talk about the Diary of the Stray Dogs. I did read the first issue, and I know you recently had the Kickstarter for the second issue. Congratulations on, that reaching this goal so people can get it in their hands. So for those that do not know what the Diary of the Stray Dogs is, explain what it is.
So that would have been again building off of what I kind of learned working for the U.S. Embassy, and wanted to shift and get as far away from doing the life and death in paradise. There's another chapter in between there was I worked on a book with my buddy Matthew Clark for Abrams, and a book called Hard Airs.
Mm-hmm.
So in between there, I was doing so Hard Airs kind of weaned me off of doing the life and death books. And it was a book that was so outside of my wheelhouse. It made me think maybe I can do different things. So that was a folk fantasy book with magic. And I kind of said, well, if I could do this, I can do something else. And I had that love for science fiction. And I wrote a book called The Diary of Stray Dogs. Uh, Me and the artist who actually worked on Crossroads, we started the book, we did a story, and life kind of got in the way in the middle of the book. We just finished about maybe 30 pages, and he kind of got busy. And as I
Mm.
said, you kind of have to keep these projects short enough that you can hold your artist.
Yeah.
That's the problem. So he kind of got busy halfway through the book. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the other artists who did uh Hard Ears. And we decided, well, I'm gonna write you a book. And I said, well, I'm gonna do it short because as I said, you don't know how long you're gonna have these guys for. And I wrote a book for him, and he loved the book so much he decided to expand it. I was working on it, and then halfway through that book, he got busy, life got in the way,
Mm-hmm.
and that book kind of was put on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of just at that time too. I was just brimming with ideas. I was just boiling with ideas, and I said, "Well, maybe I could try getting someone on the outside to do the book." So I went on Facebook, went on different places, and I ended up on a site called Upwork, and I sift through tons of artists. So I found one guy and I said, "Hey, I really like your art style. I'm doing a science fiction book. Would you be interested?" He said, "Sure." I sent him the script and he did a test page.
Mm-hmm.
We worked out the kinks, and that's how that book kind of came about. The character is a character from the original stories that I crafted with Tristan and Matthew, but she was a side character. She wasn't the star of it because my idea at the time was this book that I'm doing would
Mm-hmm.
be just to fill time. This will be like a backup story. But it ended up being the main story because it was the one that was produced, and then it had a part two, and people told me they loved the character. The character kind of evolved, that kind of thing. And I wanted to make the character. At first, the idea behind the character, she was supposed to be a Haitian character,
Mm.
and I kind of just shifted it a bit because I, I didn't want to mess it up. Because you're playing with certain aspects of different people's cultures, different people's religions, stuff like that. So I didn't want. I said, you know what? Let me just change it up a bit, make her more whiter Caribbean, so she's mixed, has a broader heritage, which is a little bit of my own history, where I have a mixed kind of background from different islands, that kind of stuff. So I kind of where you're like a part of everything, but still part of nothing, kind of.
Mhm.
So I did that with the character. She's from Barbados mainly. She's set up from Barbados, and the idea was, what would it be like to be a Caribbean character in the future?
Mm.
And at the time, a lot of my influences would have been movies like District 9
Mm.
and those kind of like dystopian, dirty, trashy science fiction kind of movies. I
Mhm.
like that kind of thing where it feels like this is a possibility of the way we're going. Movies like Elysium, that kind of stuff. That was like those were big influences in a lot of my work. So I did that, and I also like Ghost in the Shell. Big fan of that kind of cyberpunk aesthetic. You know what I mean? So those were my influences, and taking my knowledge from the embassy short story aspect of doing stuff, I was able to do a nice, neat story, wrap it up, and I was kind of happy with how it was. A lot of people actually. I was actually surprised at how attached certain people got to certain characters. A lot of people was upset with me. It was like, really? I didn't think you did. Really? I was like, it was, I was like, so, um, and I kind of try to write stuff that I want to see. So I like to see that action. I like to see that surprise. There's a part in the middle of the book where you kind of turn the page and there's a big shock, and you're kind of like, you know, a lot of that, a lot of my influence from things like Tarantino movies, where you have those moments like all of a sudden, or where you watch those movies where everything is perfect and then it just goes to crap. Everything on a
Mm.
shift, it just goes bad, kind of thing, right? So that's where a lot of my influence was from there.
It's awesome. And definitely want to talk about Neon Ghost. For those who may not know what the story is about. And I just want to say congratulations on the Kickstarter, getting it on Wise Acre Comics. That's going to be the second part of that's going to be another question that we're going to talk about that. But first, definitely want you to talk about Neon Ghost and Critical Ops Task
Task
Force.
Force. Okay,
Because
so
yeah, I know that that's like in the same universe as the Diary of the Stray Dog.
yeah, yeah. So again, a lot of these things, the whole universe was built on setbacks. So the original story, which I was doing with Tristan Roach, was starring the guy Douglas St. James. The story was supposed to be about Douglas St. James being
Mhm.
a mercenary in the
Mhm.
Caribbean in
Mhm.
the future.
Mhm.
Bam. But I had these two books on hold, so I don't want to write stories that will conflict, just kind of mess those up. So
Mhm.
I'm saying, well, what can I do? So then I said, well, you hint in those stories that he used to be a mercenary with another group. Why not tell stories about his life in that group? So I
Mhm.
said, well, yeah, that would be cool. So then I created Critical Ops Task Force to tell stories. So Critical Ops Task Force is the furthest, earliest in the timeline of the story. So that's like
Mhm.
his story. He's from the Caribbean, but it's when he's working with corporations, and I do a lot of research, and I would say kind of like interested, fascinated with the history of mercenaries work. Mercenaries had a big, big deal to do with a lot of conflicts
Mm,
today in the 70s in Africa.
mm,
It shaped a lot of stuff that we don't know today, right? So it is more of the concept of the price of a human life and what, people imagine people are paid to kill people. It's a lot different from being a soldier where there is let's say, a sense of being patriotic, or it's your country, it's your flag. But this is another person who's saying, I will take your money and I will fight for you. So that kind of stuff. So I I was looking at reading up. It's a kind of just say, well, is this right? Is this wrong? What do you think? Because in everything there's good and bad in terms of when mercenaries were hired to take over governments or to change things. You wouldn't have gotten where we are today without some of this stuff. So it was something that was kind of just always interested in. And so they said, well, let's show that. Let's show somebody dark. Let's show somebody good. Let's show somebody bad. Just kind of show it. Just show a story. So I did that. And again, it was a case because I didn't want to mess with the two other books that I was working on. The next story, Neon Goes. So when I did the Diary of the Stray Dogs, I did the follow up, Diary of the Stray Dogs 2, and there was a character in there that everyone kind of said, I like that character. So I said, well, because I didn't want to go forward and mess up stuff, I said, well, what I'll do, I'll go back and try to create a backstory for this character. So that's how Neon Ghost came about. So Neon Ghost, because of her sheer, as you start to work with some of these characters, you start to fall in love with them, or they become interesting. You start to create different things. You start to realize, or one of the most interesting things is when people come to you and talk to you about the characters and tell you things that you didn't even know or think it would have been seen that way, or what I mean, or people would, that kind of stuff. So that's how her character came about, and that's how that book came about. And I think that's where it is now. The next story I'm doing is the another critical ops task force story. That's it. That's right now that's the last project I'm doing right now. And I ended up having to kind of cannibalize some of these stories that I've done in the past. So I've
mm.
eventually I couldn't wait anymore to try to deal with that stuff. So it's kind of eaten into that story. So it's basically a retelling of the very first story that I ever wrote in this universe, but it's a retelling it's actually a remake of a book that I wrote already, but was never released.
Mm. Okay, that's interesting. I love how like we would never know unless you told us because how you said it's like once you get your bearings, like you said, like most of the stories you figure out a way for it to be like cohesive, like like there's a beginning and an end to that. So that the main question before I ask anything else is like what has been like some of the lessons you've learned to get through those things or just to where you are now when it comes to like creating your stories and doing these things for the company.
Uh, a lot of the a lot of my story plotting of I created I started to look at it in a mathematical way.
Mm,
So when I get a story, I will write a short story, decide how many pages I want the story to be, and start to split it in half and say, well, this is the midpoints, break it into quarters, and
mm,
then chop it up. Like it's almost like butchering an animal. You start to cut it up into pieces and say, well, this is for this is for that. But then you start to realize I need to take a little piece from here and put here because this middle part needs a little bit more. So I would break it into, let's say 24. My aim would be to do 24 pages, or let's say 28. So if I'm going to do a book and the book is going to be, let's say I want to do 28 pages, I will divide the book into 26 parts,
Mm,
26 pages, right?
mm,
Giving myself room to have 2 pages just in case. So then I'll take the 26 pages and divide them into 4 or 3
mm.
based on how you perceive to do a story arc, because it's a beginning, middle, end. You got to kind of understand the story structure, that kind of stuff. And what I would do is I try to make sure that every single page I should be able to write a heading telling me what's happening on the page. So one thing should always kind of happen on the page. They either traveled to town, they got into a shootout, they rescued the girl, they had something to eat. Something should always happen on a page. It should never be too many things on a page that you do. So that's how I kind of do it. And as I said, I always cut this stuff into pieces, but then I may realize I don't need so much for the beginning, and I'll look for another section and give it to, let's say, the climax of the story. I'll borrow pages from one another, and while still holding 2 pages as just in case. And then usually I'll then throw those in where I need to put in the splash pages, or to get those pages that when you turn the page, you're kind of surprised to see what you see. So as I said, it's a very mathematical, methodical way I kind of approach it. Some of it is because even though I'm artistic, I actually work in a very technical field. So I guess it's some of that technicalness coming into it.
Mm.
Down to sometimes I would draw the pages so that I know what's a what's a left right page, and I know like what's a spread page. I would plan the entire book, and some of it was because in the beginning you would do a book, and when you start to put it together, someone say, you know that this splash page is not on a double page. It's And then you say, oh shoot, we made a mistake, or so then those making mistakes kind of helps you to go forward and not make the same mistakes again. You know what I mean? So those are some of the things. So at this time, there's a lot of things that I kind of breeze through, which I think is, those part planning a book or looking at a book. Even when I sometimes look at books for someone say, hey, look at my script for me. And I would look and I would say, you know that you kind of got to shift this page because of this conflict, because I can see it in the script.
Mm.
Um, so that's kind of my approach to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and definitely we have to talk about the Kickstarter because you have the Critical Ops Task Force Volume 1 Kickstarter coming out soon. And it's amazing. 130 pages, 3 different stories. Definitely let's talk about it. And while you talk about it, I'm gonna have the link for the Kickstarter up. Let me just see how I can do with that. But yeah, definitely share with the people,
Right.
if you can share when it's coming out, what people can expect and everything like that.
Okay. So um, I didn't want to release another 32-page book and go to Kickstarter with a 32-page book.
Mhm.
So I said, well, I'll work on 2 books. That is Critical Ops 2 and it's Critical Ops 3. But I then decided, well, let me just combine them with book 1 and create a volume. So you can just kind of get a nice big book, 130 pages, which would be very similar to my volume 1 of the Diary of Stray Dogs, where I'll put a lot of artwork from the making of the books. I will put different character bios, different world building stuff inside the book, because there's a lot of stuff in it that is like people kind of get lost in world building. And
Mhm.
one of the things about when you do world building, you want to show somebody it, you want someone to see it. And sometimes putting it in the comic book is not always the best thing. Meaning that if you have this complex religion, taking 2 pages to explain the complex religion and it doesn't move the story
Mhm.
hurts the book. But if you do something like a omnibus, or you do a volume, you
Mhm.
can just do a page at the back and fill people in like an encyclopedia, and fill, who chooses to read it will read it. Who doesn't want to read it, they won't. And it kind of gives the book that longevity, readability. Like if it's on a coffee table, you may flick through it and read the stuff at the back. Uh, like when I was a kid, I used to collect Mad magazines, and you didn't read it from beginning to end. You kind of read what you liked, and the least thing you liked, you read last, which could happen months later or whatever when you're bored. Uh, so it's three stories. The first book that you read is in there, so that first story is in there. The second story is again new artist, short story again, very much like the first in terms of that quick, high tempo type of storytelling because it's 28 pages. So it has a beginning, middle, end, kind of high tempo. And that one kind of deals with, because the stories are so short, you don't kind of want to spoil them, but let's say that one deals kind of with uh, someone making a mistake or thinking that they're doing something for the greater good of humanity, but then it doesn't work out how they want.
Mm.
uh, which is what happens to a lot of people. A lot of things aren't designed to destroy the human race. It was done to do good. It was done to do good. It was like sickle cell was spread because it would stop malaria.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, yeah. And then look where it got.
So, so a lot of things was done because people thought it was doing good. And then the last story in the book, which is the longest story, which is 60 pages, and it's done by the same artist who we worked together on the Diary of the Stray Dogs. So you will see the Diary of the Stray Dogs artwork now in a COTF, Critical Ops Task Force,
Okay.
right? And it has that feel. It actually feels like a Diary of the Stray Dogs book. Follows the same characters, and this one is a longer, more cerebral book, and it kind of deals a little bit with human trafficking, but in a futuristic kind of way, where if you are doing something virtually, is it still the same thing as doing it physically, kind of thing?
Mm. Okay.
Um, it deals with parenting. Uh, as again, it deals with greed. A lot of my books kind of deal
Mm.
with greed, people having stuff, and you know they don't always end in a clean or clear cut way
Mm.
because in a way that's how my life has been. Life never tends to be, it doesn't kind of wrap itself up in a bow nice and neat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, so and that book is coming out. I would like to bring it out in August.
Okay.
The Kickstarter should be in August. Right now the follow page is there. If you sign up and you follow right now, all those who follow and continue on to back the campaign, they
Mm-hmm.
will get special exclusive gifts. So
Mm.
that's what I'm trying to do. Anybody who backed any of the books before, if you come back and you back any of these books too physically,
Mm-hmm.
you will get a special exclusive gift as a thank you for the support of the past campaigns. And we try to do things where we'll have certain covers and
Mm.
stuff which will be only on this campaign, only on Kickstarter for those who are trying to get those exclusive uh, pieces.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that you've done for like previous Kickstarters, especially because, you have, well, small world, because when I found out that like some of your comments are on Wise Acre Comics, I'm like, oh my God, everybody, like everything, all the communities are coming together. So I wanted to ask, how did you get the opportunity to, one, get into contact with Wise Acre Comics, start like a partnership with them where some of your comics would be, on
Okay.
their website and everything?
So that started because of my location, because of a lot of the sales and the market is in the US. Yes, there's
Mm-hmm.
a market here, but it's kind of like smaller market.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of want to branch out to be seen outside of the Caribbean. And I was trying to align myself with when I got in. I kind of sent my book to a lot of the publishers, who was kind of big at it. Anybody who was open to submissions at the time, I was sending my book out to them and saying, "Hey, I got a book. Um, could you check it out? Could you publish? I'm looking for a publisher." And I think what kind of the reason why a lot of the publishers probably didn't pick up or even kind of because it wasn't a superhero book. So it was almost a little bit of what are we going to do with this book? It's not a superhero book.
Mhm.
Um, so I was just a day I was on a Facebook in one of the forums or something, and uh, Frederick said, I got a book. Anybody wants to kind of read it and give me some feedback? And I was like, sure, let me do it. And and it was his book, Magnus. And after that, we kind of got to talking. I told him what I thought of the book. I went through this stuff and we talked and stuff. And I think I showed him my stuff. He's like, I really love this book. Uh,
Mm.
I'd like to work you with this. And I was like, well, another publisher said they was trying to publish it, but they kind of had me in limbo. There wasn't they weren't saying yes, they weren't saying no, but they kind of was trying to hold me to it was a kind of a mess. And I said, okay. So one of the reasons I went with Isaac was that they they were the ones that gave me that chance. Uh,
Mm.
I mean, they were the ones that kind of saw the potential in the work, and they were also you also was dealing with a person who was a genuine fan, a person who actually read the book and was like,
Mhm.
I like this book, I like your work. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? So and so it's been a joy working with them, and you know I don't take it for granted because even to be able to put our logo on the book, that's a big that's a big
Mhm.
thing to still
Mhm.
have the Beyond Publishing Caribbean, which kind of plays into our roots and that kind of stuff. So that's how it kind of and I've been with Wiseacre for the last I believe 2 3 years maybe because with COVID I can't keep track of time anymore.
No, yeah, from what I saw, it's been more than 2 years. I think it's
Yeah,
almost like three.
I gave up on can't remember the time.
No, but I for one am very happy. Why Sacred Comics is one of those people, like Midnight Comics, stuff like that. They're very like in tune with the indie comic community. They do a lot of great work. I'm happy that like your stories have a place with them and that you're able to, work with them, even to have some of their like stories as like, in the Kickstarter, it was like something that people can get as an extra and stuff. I think it's very great what you guys have been doing together, and I'm just happy to see it, to be honest.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I also saw that you do ghost writing services for people that like may need help
Yeah,
with their
yeah,
stories.
yeah. I actually did. I did help out some people, and I can't say who because then it wouldn't be ghostwriting.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I kind of enjoy the aspect of writing comics, uh, but also you want to get paid. So it's a kind of best of both worlds. You get to kind of keep sharpening yourself, work with other creators, work doing other stuff, and at the same time you're able to fund your own project because um, one of the things that working with the U.S. Embassy, working with uh, Abrams Books, these projects, being even though they weren't my projects in terms of like uh, my babies or like my brainchild, they were able to give me the funds to be able to do the stuff that I wanted to do. You know what I mean? So there's always and every aspect of working with something you should be learning. So one of the things I've even done is I've worked with a lot of different editors in terms of I've had different editors on each book, and each editor kind of leaves something with you that you kind of learn from them, and
Hmm.
it helps in if you are taking it on, it improves your rating. So you kind of get better from every single experience, good or bad, from working within the comic book field.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And I wanted to say also you had was a winner for, I forget the name of the indie comics like awards you have for the Diary of the it was the Diary of the Stray Dogs, right?
Yes, it was famous.
How did you feel to be you know seen in that way and rewarded in that way?
Yeah, it's always good to be. It's always good to be appreciated by your peers. It's always good to, even without an award, for someone just to comment on a post and say, "I really like this book," or "This book had me feeling." One of the things with the Diary Straight Up where you felt as though you did something good was, even though it pissed off a lot of people, the mere
Mm,
fact that you could kind of piss off people for what you've done, it showed that it kind of worked, right? So
mhm,
um, I do appreciate the awards. I was nominated for a Glyph Award, for two Glyph Awards, one for the Life and Death in Paradise, and also for the Diaries Redux. I got a nomination too. Uh, and I won. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Addy Awards. So we won
mhm.
Addy Awards for Crossroads. I won the Angel Awards, which was to do with community and that kind of stuff. Um, you pick up different things. Uh, it helps you go forward, but at the same time too, you have to be not let it go to your head kind of thing too. You know,
Mhm.
'cause you're never at the end. You can always improve. But
Yeah.
I do appreciate when someone takes the time out to say, well, we appreciate you for what you did.
Yeah. No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And the other part of that question I wanted to ask is, well, I'm happy whenever I see that there's more people from the Caribbean sharing their stories with the world, not only for where they live, but for, in the US, because there's a lot of us that, was from there, moved to the States. We have that representation now in these comics. So for you, what has been the response or the impact you felt, sharing these stories and like the feedback that you've gotten from people that may relate to the stories that you've written? Because a lot of them are centered around the issues that, we go through as Caribbean people, whether we live here and, we have family that is from the country or live there. You've touched on both topics. So,
The feedback or the appreciation has been there. I've had people come up and, for the most part, a lot of people cannot believe it was produced by a Caribbean writer.
mm-hmm,
You know what I mean? The way I was put together, that kind of stuff. A lot of people can't think. When I do, there's little tidbits I may do. I try to do stuff like little Easter eggs. So there's certain things I may call out a national dish, may call out a certain thing, and some people will catch and say, "Ah, I did this," or in the Life and Death, we try to use a lot of landmarks so that when you saw it and if you were aware, I've had people say, "Wow, this really took me home because it." We went and we took pictures of Spike Stone, we took pictures of places and we put them inside the book. So one of the things that I do a lot uh, is we heavily use references so that basically everything on a page there's some kind of meaning. So everything you see in the book was basically kind of done on purpose. You know what I mean? As I said, I try to put as much Caribbean influence in there uh, that I can, where it still feels natural and it doesn't break the immersion of the story, that kind of thing. And you know, as I said, some people will pick up, and some people are. I've had people come and they say, "Well, wow, they really appreciate it, or they really like that kind of thing."
yeah. I mean, I definitely know that's definitely like, it's definitely a great feeling. And the question I asked on the show is about support in the Black slash blurred community, the space we're in.
Mhm.
And I asked, what have we done well so far to probably uplift each other, to put to help each other? What can we do better to keep doing that? I asked that question because everybody, based on their own experiences, they have different input, different opinions, and I just like to have that conversation.
So you mean in terms of what I think the indie community can do to help push each other forward, kind of?
Yeah, because like people, I asked this question because I have different people that come on the show that's part of the Blur community, whether they're in the indie space or cosplayer space or small business space. They all have different things and like input. So it's really based on your part and what you've seen and like your part that you're in
Um,
and what we can do better.
for me, I would probably like to see more sharing in terms of sharing each other's projects or sharing each other's work. Because one of the things that we as creators, especially when we do Kickstarters, we're kind of faced with, and you kind of realize pretty quickly, you cannot support everybody financially. You know what I mean? So, as you said, you would like to back everybody. You can't back everybody who comes onto your show. You can't back everybody who's a friend that has a Kickstarter, that kind of thing. And then if you do back the ones you do like or whatever, it doesn't mean that in turn they will back your project either. So it's a case of sharing is one of the things that is free. You can give somebody a share, you can share their work, you can talk about their work, you can kind of give, you know, make the community feel more connected versus being the small pockets of groups and cliques that kind of push each other, but then to another group, this one person doesn't exist, that kind of thing. Um, but all in all, I think that would probably be one of the things I think that could be done because, as I said, I do understand that financially you cannot expect. You should be building a fan base and sharing your work among other people will help do that. Because you're not competing. I'm not competing against another creator. We're just doing the same thing. We're just trying to create great work and share great work with the fans. So if we can do that more, that would benefit because, as I said, we can't support. I cannot expect all the creators to come out and try to back a Kickstarter. That would be unrealistic, and it's not true growth. True growth is people who aren't in the community buy your books. That's where you really want to spread yourself.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And one of the last questions I was going to ask is, well, two parts. The first one is, what are some of the goals that you have for everything you're doing, the company, and everything like that? And the second part is, how has this journey helped you as a person?
Um, I'll say I'll start with the journey. Um, it's kind of shown me that I can achieve certain things. I- if I had to go back, or when I first started, I didn't think I would have done almost 20 books, have books published, have stuff like that. So it kind of shows me that you can accomplish certain things, if you set your mind, and not only just accomplish certain things, put out a really good product that people enjoy, that's award winning, that can sit on a shelf or be, me among any other book out there, kind of thing. In terms of future and where I'm going and that kind of stuff, to be honest, I really don't know. Um, I really don't know
It's okay.
because I don't want to unrealistically say, well, in 5 years I would like to be doing this, this, and
Mm.
this. Uh, Life has a way of just being life sometimes, and sometimes you have to kind of, you know, go with the flow, kind of thing. Um, so I would tell you that I wouldn't want to stop creating comic books. or wouldn't want to stop writing. That's as much as I can say.
No, yeah, that's fine. There's never, I feel like there's never a right answer to that. That's for your own personal, because there's so many things you're doing. You have to, sometimes you have to think on that and what
Yeah,
the future of that is. And then some people, it's like they have a whole 500 thing list. It doesn't make anybody bad depending on where they're at when it comes to that. Because even for me, it's like I may have plans for things, but I can't say that it's like 5, 10 years in the future. You know what I mean? It's
hmm
just like sometimes it might just be next year, for next year, and it really not like the long term, short term, but and yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much for giving me the time to ask you about everything that you do. Hopefully you had a good time.
yeah, I really had a really good time. I really enjoyed the show.
Thank you. And I just want to give you the time now to plug in where you want people to follow you, where you want people to read your stories, keep up with what's coming up next, and everything like that.
Okay, so Nigel Lynch, you can get my books on Wiseacre Comics. Uh, it is wiseacre.usa. Look for Gary the Stray Dogs, Neon Ghost, Critical Ops Task Force. There's hard copy digital. I have a Kickstarter coming out soon. Right now, I just want people to kind of sign up, follow, and if you do follow and you continue on, you will be rewarded. There's stuff there for you if you do that. And my main focus is really kind of build a fan base in this next couple of months. Uh, my focus is on the Kickstarter to get that Kickstarter out. And if you want to follow me, you can follow me on the Nigel Verse on Instagram, or you could. That's basically it, really. Try to join my Instagram page, and that's you could DM me if you want to, if you want my services to do writing, or even just looking at scripts. Any kind of help, really. I've helped a lot of people. Sometimes I just help people with their stuff.
Yeah, that's true. And I tried to show while you were talking the different things, and then this is the Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Instagram, the website for Wiseacre Comics, the stories that they mentioned that's on there, as well as the Kickstarter. Whoever watches it back, I showed it twice. There's no reason for you to not go and check it out. But definitely, I really do appreciate you guys so much for joining every time, whether it's for a short period of time, whether you supported, whether you shared that we were gonna have a show. I really do appreciate it. And for those who may not know what I do, hi, my name is Lizzie. There's multiple things that I do. AnimeInkArt first and foremost started as me sharing my art. I traditionally draw and digitally edit. Now that happened because I still traditionally draw for the most part, and I wanted it to look nicer on things that I would sell. And I started off on Redbubble. That's how it started. Now we have the Redbubble and the Shopify. We're getting back to it, but we've always wanted to see more creators that looked like us. And as we found those people, we wanted to share them on our page while we did our own thing. And that's what kind of like how we build momentum and community with people. And we got to interact with a lot of people. Also, I do cosplay now. That was something that I was always teasing for the most part, when I felt comfortable, because sometimes for different events I would vent, for different, because when I started, it was like anime related. So I would cosplay, or half cosplay turned into full cosplay. Now I do cosplay on the side as well. Shout out to Otaku Noir. We are affiliates with them. They make amazing mystery boxes within the blur community. Whether it's people that write stories, whether it's people that do art, that are black, that love blurry things, you can expect that from them. So their Siren box is coming out in June. The pre-order should be coming up now for that. So if you use code AnimeInkArt, you should get free shipping on your order. So that's all uppercase, even though I may be putting that as all lowercase, but it's fine. It's fine. When you watch it back, you'll understand. Free shipping with Otaku Noir. I always try to make sure I do this now, because so I don't forget. So definitely go and do that. You should get free shipping off of your order for any mystery box you do. There's only quarterly, so there's only 4 boxes per year. But definitely it's always worth it. As well as we did get the opportunity grant from Blurs Unite. They are a big community that hosts different streamers, gamers, people that want to show themselves creatively, whether it's Twitch or on other platforms. So hopefully we get to work with them in the future. We also work with Critical Care Comics on the side as like nonprofit volunteer work. And they are an organization that goes to different hospitals to put smiles on children's faces because a lot of them can't come out sometimes. So they are centered towards comics, and they have heroes which dress up in Marvel and DC characters, and regular. You don't have to cosplay if you don't want to. Either or, whatever you do, they'll go to different hospitals and we give out comics and we give out toys for free. So I am part of the New York chapter, even though I'm in New Jersey. I do drive to the Bronx to do that. So they have Las Vegas, which is the original, New York, and South Carolina. If you're interested in any of those, if you want to help us out because we're expanding, definitely go to the Critical Care Comics Instagram or their website, and it's an easy process to sign up for it. If you do New York, hey, you never know, I might be interviewing you, so be a fun time. As well as I'm going to share the news soon, but I don't like to share anything unless I know it's confirmed. But I guess whoever watches this back, they'll hear it first, and I'll share it once I get email confirmation. But the people at AnimeInkArt, they're a free anime convention in Japan Village. Critical Care Comics will be having a table at their convention to promote the organization. So for those that may come to the convention and they may be interested in Critical Care Comics, want to join the cause or want to donate to the cause, that's what our table will be for. So once I get more details, I will share that on my pages, which is if you follow Anime Inkart 1, that's mostly where I will share it. If you want to join the broadcast channel, I'll probably share anything you want to know. I'll share it there. We also have the Anime Inkart Live 1 page, which is like I share, the promotions for the show and different clips and stuff like that on that page. So definitely, please feel free to join all of those and be on the lookout for us being at AniTomoCon. Y'all heard it there first. I'm not saying anything else until I get the email, and there's some other things that I'm not going to say until it's confirmed. But exciting things. And with that, I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Bye, guys.